Yep.
Yep, you are. Okay. Show. Right. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. We'll put straight into it. Here's the timetable, which you should have been sent with the link, all the information. What I will do as we go through is I will remind you when we come back for the breaks. We'll have some sizable breaks, and we'll do the best we can with what we got. So, introduction to beekeeping. Then this is really just a short course for people who are thinking, well, is beekeeping going to be for me or not? Let's find out what it is. And very often what happens is a local association have put on a 10, 12, 14-week course or whatever. And you've really got to go right through the course. And I'm trying to do that in one day so that you can say, well, yep, I want to go further, or that's a bit too much for me. Now, this was run last weekend for another, my local association. And certainly out of that, we've had two saying, no, we can't put in the commitment, which is absolutely fine. So a tiny bit about BIBBA. It's a beekeeping charity. It's very fast growing to the point where there's the membership has increased by 50% in the last 12 months. So it's established in 1964, so it's a long-running organisation. And the purpose is to try to encourage using bees that suit the local environment. So effectively what these days are called locally adapted, rather than imports that come from other parts of the world that have evolved in different climates that may be unsuitable. We've got a lot of education. We've got a lot of events like this one here and publications and that sort of thing as well. So if you do get into beekeeping, please remember BIBBA, because it's a significant player in the beekeeping world. I'm going to be your presenter today. My name's Roger Patterson, as Richard has pointed out. I hope from that photograph there and the one that you're seeing on the screen, you're not too disappointed. I do have two advisors, and they're down beside me. There's Nell and Rosie, and they're probably the best two best known dogs in beekeeping. And of course, they give you a welcome as well. What is this about then? Well, it's really converted from an in-person event that's been running for 15 years by my local beekeeping association, Worcester Green Beekeepers Association, which is in West Sussex. And as I've already mentioned, we did our event last weekend, which is effectively the same, but it was tweaked for the local area. This one here, I've set it up for anybody throughout the British Islands and Ireland, because beekeeping does vary depending on the location. You definitely won't learn enough today to manage bees. And a few years ago, we had a lady came on our course, this very course, or slightly modified, and thought she was going to learn enough to go out and teach beekeeping. Oh no, you can't. So it really is just a sort of toe in the water sort of thing. So it's just enough to decide for you folk to decide if you want to go any further or not. Richard's mentioned the a question answer button. Please keep the questions relevant to the section that I've just done. And we'll cover everything at the end of each section by questions, but any general questions for either what you've heard during the day that perhaps you hasn't been clear to you, or anything else you want to ask, please ask at the end of the day. You chat for chat. Recording. So Richard's done that. I'm sorry there's no visual displays. Normally in an in-person meeting, I can bring lots of things for you to see, get your hands on, see what things are for, the sort of kit that you need, that sort of thing. I'm sorry, I can't do any more than just show a few photographs today. But what I want you folk to do is to enjoy yourselves. Even if you think to yourself, it might not have been that good, but it's better than going shopping. That's absolutely fine. I haven't got a problem with that at all. Oh, here's an opening statement. Beekeeping is fun. And if I was better known, that would be a catchphrase, because I genuinely do think beekeeping is fun. Um, uh, I'm absolutely passionate about it, and I know a lot of other people are as well. I've been keeping bees since 1963, and I've met some really nice people in beekeeping. Okay, I've met a few that perhaps I'd rather not be too bothered where I see again, but in general, beekeepers are pretty nice people. What beekeeping has done is brought me a lot closer to nature. I was born and brought up on a farm in West Sussex, and I've had nature around me all the time. But with beekeeping, there's even more to see than you would normally see. Bees themselves have taught me a lot too, by me just watching them, trying to understand what they're doing, and interpreting what they're telling me. And hopefully, I can share a little with that, a little of that with you today. So a tiny bit about me. Started in 1963, as I said. I had 130 colonies for about 15 years, and I was using beekeeping for part of my living. I've been teaching and demonstrating since the early 1970s. For the last 15 years, or a bit more now, I've been the apiary manager at Whisper Green. And if I talk about WGBKA, that's my local association, Whisper Green. I speak and demonstrate widely, probably more, certainly as much as anyone. And I've certainly done more webinars than anybody else in the last 12 months. Sometimes I've done 3 in a day. I'm an author of one book at the moment, which I'll be telling you a little bit about. I've got 4 more on the go, fairly close to being published. I write booklets, articles, and that sort of thing. But I tell people what bees have spent a long time telling me, not simply recycling from other books, as unfortunately quite a lot do, along with their mistakes. I own and manage what's known as Dave Cushman's website. And probably if you've gone online and put in bees or whatever, beekeeping, you'll probably get Dave Cushman's website on the front page, first page. Dave Cushman was an ill man for the last 15 years or so of his life, and he built what's reckoned to be the world's most comprehensive and authoritative beekeeping website. He died 10 years ago now, and he left it to me in his will. I keep it going. So if you want to know anything about bees that sound, go there rather than some of the other places where you'll get some, you may get some dubious information. So right from the very start, then, this is very definitely not a hard sell. I will not be trying to persuade you to go into beekeeping, which I know a lot of people do. There are some really good sides of the craft, and it is a craft, but I should be giving warts and all, because I want to be honest with people, and I want to say, look, you know, there are these pluses, but there's also these minuses that you need to take into account. It's much better that than people charging off into beekeeping with boatloads of enthusiasm, and then all of a sudden they come to a screeching halt. Oh, you never told me about that. So beekeeping is one of those things you need to be responsible about, not something like picking up a set of golf clubs or tennis racket or walking boots or whatever. You can soon put them down. You cannot put a colony of bees down in that way. So what I'm going to do is tell you what's really involved, and perhaps some of the things that you might wish to avoid, because there are tripwires, I'm afraid. Now, you need to understand that bees aren't fluffy pets. I've got to be quite forceful about this because we do get people come into a beekeeping and oh, aren't they lovely? That sort of thing. Bees are technically food producing animals, the same as chickens, ducks, pigs, sheep, cattle. They are technically the same. Unfortunately, they don't have the same legal protection, but they are. They're food producing animals. However, they are still incredibly interesting. There has been a lot of recent bee publicity in the last 10, 15 years or so, and some just recently, which quite frankly, beekeeping can do without. You need to be a little bit careful what you read, because some of the stuff that comes from the media is not written by beekeepers. It's written by other people who just gather information from here, there, and everywhere. What they don't seem to understand is that they might try to publicise beekeeping, but they don't seem to understand there is a commitment and level of responsibility needed. Right from the very start, I'm going to suggest very strongly that you get involved with your local beekeeping association. Now, beekeeping associations cover the whole of the British Islands and Ireland. There's somebody somewhere that you can get involved with. I have to say, getting around and seeing a lot of them, they do vary a lot. Some are very good, some are less so. If you talk to some of the members, some of them will say they're absolutely awful, but I don't know. I'm only going a little bit on hearsay. The thing to do, of course, is to go and visit several of them before you decide which one is your chosen one. But make your mind up based on are they welcoming? Are they friendly? Are they helpful? I don't mean, oh, hello, how are you? And, all that sort of stuff. I mean, genuinely friendly, not smarmy friendly. Have they got a teaching apiary? Because if they have, and meetings are held there, okay, let's forget COVID, but and the restrictions. But if there's a teaching apiary there where they've got their own hives and enough of them, they are probably in a good position to give you really good tuition. Ask, are the attendees allowed to handle bees? In some instances, they're not. The demonstrator just handles the colony, get 20 people round a hive, which is far too many. And all you learn is how somebody else handles bees, not to learn to do it yourself. You need to ask if you can progress from a beginner, because I know there are some beekeeping associations that only teach the very first year. After that, they're on their own. And we at Whisper Green have, or had, a couple of people who joined us from 50 miles away, and their own local association. When they finished the first year, they said, well, what's happening next year? Oh, well, you're on your own. What do you mean we're on our own? Oh, well, if you want to know any more, go and read a book or go and look on YouTube. And sorry, that's not the way to teach beekeepers, and not really the way to learn either. You'll probably, if you've read 2 books, you'll find there are already many different methods of keeping bees. Advice does vary an awful lot, and for quite a lot of different reasons as well. Each beekeeper's got their own way of managing their bees, which I call a system, and they develop that to suit themselves, perhaps the amount of time they got or where they live, all sorts of things like that. So if you get 2 people, then they may well give you different advice for the same question. This is my own personal view, but beekeeping at the amateur level is actually very simple. There are some what I call the basics, the simple sort of stuff that all beekeepers need. that are factual. Little things like life cycles and what happens in a colony when it's preparing to swarm, they are pretty standard sort of things. But sadly, a lot of beekeepers, and I mean quite a lot, don't actually know these. But if you get these simple things right, a lot of what you may be told, you can easily work out, and you can probably sort out any problems you have with the colony too. I use sound and simple methods. I don't use anything that's complicated, and I use minimal equipment as well. And that's what I'll be trying to encourage new beekeepers to do. What I do know is that new beekeepers these days need to learn fairly quickly to get up to a certain level. No longer can they do it in a more leisurely fashion like the old beekeepers used to when I started, because we've got so many things thrown at us these days that you really do need to know what's going on inside a colony. I suggest very strongly that you have 2 colonies at all times, and I'll be giving the reasons later on. But please remember that or understand that learning is ongoing. Even after keeping bees nearly 57 years, I am still learning, not quite every day, but on a very regular basis. So bees, then, when we talk about bees, which ones do we mean? Excuse me. People speak about bees as if there is only one type. Oh, bees are in trouble, or bees are in decline, or whatever. Well, there are approximately 20,000 species worldwide, and there are still some they reckon are undiscovered and unnamed. So that's how many there are worldwide. On the UK mainland, there are around about 250 species. I'll say around about 250 because some are either on the point of extinction or have just become extinct, or there may well be some introductions. As two that have come in the last 20 years are the ivy bee and Bombus hypnorum, the tree bumblebee. So it is up and down a bit. Some are being reintroduced as by humans as well. There are less on the islands for obvious reasons. So perhaps the Isle of Man and Jersey and Guernsey and Ireland, there are smaller numbers there. But beekeepers only keep one species, which are termed honeybees, and the species is Apis mellifera. And I guess most people know a bit about taxonomical naming. There are around about 28 subspecies of that around the world. And I'll say about 28 subspecies because even the scientists can't make up their mind. So let's say it's 26 to 30 subspecies. And if the scientists can't make their mind up, then the rest of us can't either. Now, with these subspecies, it's reckoned that bees first started in the Near East somewhere and then migrated to Africa, where they then further migrated into different areas and then became isolated by natural barriers, things like mountains, water, sand, all sorts of things like that. And they then developed their characteristics to suit the environment they found themselves in. Now, there's only one subspecies that's native to the whole of Northern Europe, north of the Alps, Pyrenees, and to the Atlantic seaboard to the west, and Urals to the east, and of course as far north as bees would survive naturally. So we are part of that, and we have only one native subspecies. It's called Apis mellifera mellifera. Now, insects are classified by their wings, whether they've got any or not. And bees are in a group called Hymenoptera, which is quite a big group. Now, the whole colony of honeybees lives through the winter. And the reason they can do that is because they're capable of storing food. None of the other bees, bumblebees don't store food, and solitary bees don't either. Well, bumblebees don't store enough food. They store just a little bit, but that's all. Now, of course, it's storage of food that makes them attractive to humans. So what do they look like then? Well, there are different kinds of honeybees, as I said, different subspecies. That one up there is our native honeybee, Apis mellifera mellifera. That one is what's called the Italian honeybee, which is Apis mellifera ligustica. Now, that evolved in southern Europe, and of course, in very much different conditions than the one on the left. And the one on the right is the Italian. They do quite well short term here, but they're not long term survivors. As beekeepers, we often get told, "Oh, I've got a swarm of bees or whatever," and it's usually something else. Usually something else. So what can they be confused with? Well, bumblebee on the left-hand side, of which are just over 20 species in the UK. That is one of them. And solitary bee on the right-hand side, which are actually very variable. There are 240 or so of those, 230, 240 of those. Again, some of those are on the point of extinction. Now, some of these bumblebees and solitary bees are species specific, so they really only feed on one type of a plant. If you've got something in nature that's just got a danger, such as a sting, there's very often something else that will mimic it, so it looks a bit like it. And these two aren't bees or wasps. The one on the left looks like a wasp. The one on the right looks like a bee. And they're not bees at all. They are hoverflies. If you see a swarm of bees, it could only possibly be honeybees because they're the only ones that swarm. And there's one there with me taking it or removing it from a tree, which is a place that I've probably removed 8 or 10 from exactly the same place, exactly the same tree over my beekeeping life. So where do they live naturally then? Well, in trees, in cavities. This is an oak tree in St Leonard's Forest, only about 6 or 7 miles from me. And there's one of our local beekeepers, Daisy, looking at it. And there's where the hole is, and there it is. Now, when you get trees like that, the cavity usually rots out upwards. You'd expect it to rot downwards, but they don't. They usually rot upwards. So what's things like in a natural situation then? Well, I don't normally apologise more than I have to, but I really must apologise for my use of PowerPoint graphics. But I've just set up here really a section through a tree with a cavity. There's the entrance there. The cavity is obviously the blue bit at the bottom, and the whole of this area here. It's not normally that shape. This is, of course, a diagrammatic. Now you get the comb and the nest inside, which is the yellow bit and the brown bit. The brown bit is the brood where the young bees are reared, and the yellow is either empty comb, which is likely to be at the bottom here, or their stores, which could be honey and pollen. I'll be speaking about those a bit later in I think one of the other sections. So what you get is, I know it's thinking in human terms, which is not the best way to do your beekeeping, but it's looking from our point of view as if the bees are putting their food as far away from the entrance as they can to avoid robbing by either other bees or wasps. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, because during the winter, there may not be much brood at all, if any. During the summer, that brood nest expands and contracts. Now, when there's good weather and there's honey and pollen coming in, that tends to go in the top, and the brood nest expands and the queen lays in the empty comb underneath. So expanding the brood nest. So that tends to drive it down. The vacated brood cells here are then filled up with honey and pollen, their stores, so that the brood area is driven down. Now, when it gets towards the end of the active season and there's not much forage around, the bees use the food for their stores. They will keep the brood area, even though there might not be any brooding. The bees will cluster in there themselves, and they've got all this food above them to munch their way through during the winter. And that is really why they store their food. It's really for winter survival. Now, beekeepers need to understand that. And in order to do our beekeeping, what we should try to do is replicate what the bees do some way or other. Unfortunately, we don't always achieve it because a lot of beekeepers, and I'm afraid a lot of teachers, seem to see bees in human terms and, bees are trying to do this, bees are trying to do that. We really need to think as beekeepers what bees are trying to do so that we can help them. Now, it's very difficult to get the start of a nest in a tree cavity. So this is a building, a wooden building, and this is a swarm that's only just gone in, and probably 24 hours, not much more than that, probably the previous day. And the bees have started building their own comb here. And that's not the same one. That's another one I've removed from a building. In fact, I've removed several hundred. I don't call them wild or feral. I call them free living colonies because I think that covers all of them. But that's what they tend to do. They tend to build, if they can, straight long combs. And like the cavity I was showing you, you tend to get the food at the top here, look, and the brood at the bottom. I don't know where the entrance was there, but that was the cross member, the same as that. So the bees have found a very nice cavity there, and I suspect the entrance was down here somewhere. I've probably got another photograph, but I didn't want to bother you too much with that. Now, as beekeepers, what we do in a conventional hive, and I'll talk about conventional and unconventional a bit later on, is we put what's called a queen excluder above the brood so that we can keep the queen away from the honey. And here's one. Oops, yep. Here's one here. In fact, there's two there. Basically all it is just a flat plate. These two are plastic. They could be metal or they could actually be made out of wire, and they're of a size that stop the queen going through. So the slots are a little bit smaller than the standard queen is. So parts of a beehive then, what happens and where? Well, the queen excluder I just told you about is there on this particular hive, the floor there. So the queen is confined to what we call the brood chamber. Now that can vary in size depending on the design of hive. That's beyond what we're talking about today. So that's where all the brood is reared, down there. Above that, we've got what are called supers, and we don't know the origin of the word supers. It doesn't really make sense unless it's a shortening of superstructure. People have tried to find out, and they can't. That's all people can come up with. Now, in those supers, that is where the honey is stored. And above the queen excluder is usually what the beekeeper harvests. Some beekeepers, and getting more and more, are leaving one full super for the colony for the winter stores, so that they don't have to feed them any other form of sugar. But that's basically what it is, and that's what a normal conventional beekeeping is about. There are different designs of hives set up in different ways, but the vast majority are set up in this way, which of course replicates what the bees are going to do. Brood at the bottom, honey at the top, entrance here. And then of course there's a roof on top, and off we go. What do bees bring into the hives then? I'm trying to get rid of something. Okay. But what do bees bring into the hive? Well, nectar is one thing. So what is nectar? Well, in human terms, it's really a bribe that's offered by flowers to encourage insects, pollinating insects, to go there to get the nectar and accidentally pollinate the flowers. It's well, being sugar, it's obviously the carbohydrate part of the colony's diet, which is largely what adult bees feed on, but they do use it for other things as well, including brood food. How do they carry it home? So how does this bee get it home? Well, they've got they carry it internally in what's called a honey stomach, honey sac, call it what you like. Interestingly, this photograph, I was rummaging around on the internet for something yesterday, and I found this photograph was used, I think, by the Independent in 2014. So it was. I used it on the BIBBA website, and they just lifted it from BIBBA website. They did give a credit to BIBBA, but anyway, it's that's a bit of an interest. I don't really know why I told you that. Anyway, not to worry. Right, what happens to this nectar then? I won't go into the finer details, but the bees obviously collect it from flowers. There are also on the backs of some leaves of plants, and laurel is probably one of the best examples. If you have a look early in the year at the young leaves, there are two what are called extrafloral nectaries behind the leaves. Now, of course, the bees aren't using them for pollination at all. But when I say nectar comes from flowers, it can come from other sources as well, but only in a minor way. When it's in the flower, it's approximately 20 to 40% sugar. Most of the rest is water, but there's it varies considerably. Some plants have very much higher sugar content than others. The bees, the worker bees, well, the foraging bees rather, bring it back to the hive, hand it over to a house bee, who then places it in the cells. Now, I'm not a chemist, so I don't know how they do it, but they convert the sugars by enzyme action, and then they drive off excess water, because if there's too much water in it, it will ferment. When it gets down to, for normal flower honey, anything under about 18 and 19%, the bees then cap it with a wax capping for storage, and it will keep for a long time at that point, so the air can't get at it. Now, this is a sort of very much a generalization, but honey is approximately 17% water, plus or minus perhaps 2%. Now, some honeys have got a different water content, and I think heather honey is probably about 3 or 4% above what one might term normal flower honey. Ling heather, I mean, not bell heather or crossleaf teeth. It's around about 75% sugar, but that again is variable. And according to the books, nearly 200 identified trace elements. Now that, of course, will depend on the source and the location. Here's comb with both nectar and honey in. This is the nectar here that's unsealed. This is a honey that's sealed. And what the bees are doing down here is processing it. And processing is probably not the most wise term to use, but the bees do actually process it because they're making a physical change to it. And they're driving the water off, and you see in these various places, part cappings, the bees are starting to cap those. And here they've just started, there they've just started, there they have as well. So to get from there to there, depends on the temperature, depends on the strength of the hive, could be probably a couple of days. And that's a comb out of one of the supers. And once the honey is capped like that, it will actually keep in the cells for many years. Bees also bring pollen into the hive, and there's a bee on a flower, which I think is a fleabane. Fleabane, or yeah, fleabane, isn't it? And on the back legs of some bees, you get what's called a corbicula, which is commonly called a pollen basket. And some bumblebees have got them, and some solitary bees, I think, have got them. Excuse me. What the bee is doing is collecting the pollen, putting it in this pollen basket, and then they'll carry it home. They'll fly home with it. And during the summer, if you see bees with little lumps on the back legs, that's what they're doing. They're collecting pollen. And over the years, I've had many people take photographs and send me, email them to me and say, "I've seen a bee with a growth on it, or it's diseased or whatever. What's wrong with it? I've been hearing that bees have been in trouble. You know, it's just no. That's absolutely okay." So they fly home with that on their back, and they put it in cells like this. And pollen can vary quite a bit in color depending on the source. This is blue, and I suspect, if I took the photo, well, I did take the photograph, I suspect that's come from rose bay willow herb. But you've got other colors here. You've got orange there. I think you've got a sort of creamy color here. You've got a mixture in these three cells, these four cells down here. So they do vary quite a bit. The pollen is used mainly for rearing the brood, although adults do eat pollen as well. Propolis, you've probably all heard of propolis, but may not know what it is. Well, it's a plant resin, and it's used by plants to protect them. The bees bring it back, strangely enough, in their corbicula, a pollen basket. This is very, very sticky. It comes from plants like horse chestnuts, the sticky buds, poplars, those sort of plants. And it's used to seal up the home, seal it against water, make it waterproof, and also they will block up gaps, quite big gaps with it as well. They will also, what one might term, varnish the inside of their home. And it wasn't until 20, 25 years or so ago that we discovered why they do it. I've mentioned that I've removed an awful lot, several hundred colonies from wild places. It doesn't matter what sort of cavity they've got, whether it's a natural one like a tree cavity or a man-made one like a building. Bees will cover the inside of their nest. And we now know, through a lot of work been done, mainly in the United States, that because propolis is antimicrobial, it's basically a shield for self-medication. And it's surprising what nature does. And we a lot of beekeepers will destroy that, scrape it off or flame it or whatever. and they're going against what the bees are trying to do. And they can bring water in as well. Now, during a time when there's a lot of nectar coming in, the water that's driven off the nectar is probably sufficient for the colony. But when there's no nectar, little or no nectar coming in, foraging bees will be diverted to go and bring in water, because of course they need it to keep humidity up. Now, the 3 casts, and I know cast is probably not the right word, but it's used in beekeeping terms for the 3 different types of bees you get in a hive. The vast majority of them are workers, which are females, but they're incomplete females. They can lay eggs, but they've got undeveloped ovaries, and they cannot mate. Or they cannot mate. Full stop. There's a queen that everybody knows about. If you get a observation hive at a show or something like that, people first thing they ask often is the queen there? Where's the queen? Can I see the queen? Well, she is quite an important member of the hive, but so are the others as well. And the other one is the drones, which are the male bees. So what do they do then? Well, there's a queen there. She lives all year round, so there should be a queen in a hive most of the time. There are going to be the odd occasion when there isn't one there, but that's a bit beyond what we're dealing with today. She normally lays all the eggs. She goes and gets mated on the wing with drones, mates once. Well, not mates once, but once she starts laying, she cannot get mated again, or put it this way, doesn't usually get mated again. What we've discovered over the years, she gives off pheromones which help to control the behavior of the colony. Here's the drones and workers. There's a drone there up against the workers. Now, the drones live usually summer only. There are occasions when they can live longer, but it's abnormal, let's say. They do mate with the queen, and still there are an awful lot of beekeepers who think that's all they do. And I've heard it said and written that that's all they do. Well, we now know there's a lot more to it. They do keep morale high, and they do generate warmth as well. And there are lots of other things, perhaps quite a lot more still to be discovered. But beekeeping, I think we've only just touched the surface. And then the workers, which are the rest of those there and make up the biggest number in the hive, they live year round. If they don't, the colony's dead. They do all sorts of things like nursing the brood, feeding the brood, looking after it, defense, cleaning the hive, foraging, all sorts of things like that. So they are the workforce. Beekeepers need to know the life cycles, not perhaps at your stage, but when you get into beekeeping, if indeed you do, then you need to be knowing these fairly soon, and that's one of the basics that I mentioned earlier. So I just got a line here: when the egg hatches into a larva, although technically it's not hatching, but in beekeeping terms, we call it hatching. When the cell is sealed for pupation and when it emerges into the adult. Now, all bees emerge full size. They're not like mammals. They don't. They're not born and then they increase their growth. So queen is 3 days, 8 days, and 15. I know some books will give different numbers, but I always reckon to go on the fairly cautious side. With the workers, it's 21 days, so 3 weeks from the laying of the egg to emergence, and drone is 3 days longer at 24. And these are the most important ones, those 2 there from a beekeeping point of view. I won't bother you too much about the reasons now. But I've got to say that these are the ones that people should remember more than the other two. And I still come across people who've been keeping bees 20 years and they don't know these. They're nice and easy to remember because all you got to remember is a figure 3. All you do is multiply that each time. So 3 3s are 8, 3 8s are 15. And I know there's going to be quite a flurry on the Q&A, but saying that's wrong. Well, it may be wrong, but if you remember it for the rest of your beekeeping days, then you'll know. So 3 3s are 8, 3 8s are 15. Okay. Why do people keep bees? Why do they even want to keep bees? Well, one of the common ones we hear at shows, if you have a stand or presence at a show, I want to pollinate the garden. Well, the good news is that if there are quite a lot of bees about, it will improve pollination. Yes, of course it will. But just keeping one colony of bees at the bottom of your garden isn't going to improve your crops at all. I don't think people often understand what pollination is about because I've been at shows and talked to general public and they say, oh, I'm on allotment or something, or my neighbour's got bees or whatever. And my flowering tree has put up a lot more flowers since the bees have been there. That's not what it's about. I've also heard people say that they've their potato or carrot crop has been improved because of bees. Well, of course they're not. When I tell them, I'm not sure they actually believe me because I think they've just got it in their mind that they have. Anyway, it doesn't matter if I feel better about it. Absolutely fine. People want honey for the family. Well, that's okay because a colony of bees, depending on where you are, can probably give you somewhere between £30 of honey and perhaps 100 as an average. Okay, 1 year it's going to be up, next year it's going to be down, but on average. Now, some areas are very much better for forage than others. So there are some areas in the country that are really marginal for bees. It could be for a variety of reasons. Sheep pasture isn't that great because, of course, you get things like miniaturization of plants taking place. So the smaller the plants, the less nectar they yield. Height makes quite a difference as well because you very often get wind or, a degree or two colder and perhaps not particularly good ground for plants to grow. You might get stones or whatever. For a hobby, which is fine, it's a really good hobby if you can if you can stand it. A lot of people go into, well, not a lot, but some people go into beekeeping thinking that they're going to make an income, second income. Well, if I tell you that the number of people in Britain and Ireland, or British Isles and Ireland, who actually make a living entirely from bees, you can certainly count on two hands. They've generally got some other income as well. Okay, you might make a little bit, perhaps if you're, in fact, in my local association, there are a couple who are gardeners, and they keep about 100 colonies of bees for part of their living. Interest in nature? Well, yes, you will get a lot closer, same as I have. Use of hive products as well. Honey's very good. Use it in the kitchen as a substitute for sugar. You can make all sorts of things like sweets. Put it in cakes, all sorts of things like that. I'm not a culinary expert at all. And of course, the beeswax as well can be used for cosmetics and those sort of things. Then, of course, there's further interest, perhaps photography. I knew somebody who get bees simply so they could paint them. Well, there aren't too many people going to do that, but it's a different reason for keeping bees. If anybody wants to keep bees because they've heard of the plight of bees and they want to help the bees, please, please, please don't. Because there are a lot of people who've got bees simply for this reason, and they seem to think if they just keep them at the bottom of the garden, they're helping the bees. They're not, because if they don't look after them and care for them properly, they will get disease. They'll get all sorts of things wrong with them, and they'll probably die out fairly quickly anyway. You're not helping bees at all. It's almost like keeping chickens to save birds. You know, it's crazy. Here's an example of what you can come across. There's Daisy yet again. And she's looking inside a beehive roof. In fact, she's a field biologist by degree, so she's got a little bit of an interest. And these are some of the sort of things that I've photographed over the years inside beehive roofs. So you know, they're not things to squash or whatever. They're things to admire and enjoy. So that's it, folks. We're now into question time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger.
Oh, right. You're not still here, are you?
I am, yes. Yeah.
Crikey.
Glutton for punishment.
Have you paid?
We'll have a whip round on the way around. Right, first question then. Might be a silly question. There are no silly questions on this course. But why
the only silly questions are the ones that aren't answered.
That's true.
Aren't asked, rather.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Why do we confine the queen in the brood box with a queen excluder?
We don't have to. But some people don't like extracting honey from combs where brood has been raised. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you want to find the queen or manage the colony reasonably easily, if you've got one area for the queen to be in, then it's a lot easier. Some people work without queen excluders, but I think you need to be quite a decent beekeeper to do so, because what will happen is the bees will do what's called chimney. Do you want me to? Yeah. Are we okay as we are? Or
yes. Yeah. Oh no, you can leave that.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. That's okay. They'll do what's called chimney, so they'll revert to their natural situation, which is a long or a high, rather, narrow brood nest. So what they'll probably do, what the queen will probably do, is go up into perhaps 3 or 4 boxes. So if you want to find the queen, you've got to go into all the boxes, which could be very, very time consuming. It's really for management purposes that we do it. We don't have to. So it's not a silly question.
Okay, so Debbie asks, where do they store water that they've collected?
I've never seen water stored, but I've spoken to some of the scientists, and they claim then that water does get stored. Personally, I'd be quite surprised if they did, but it's presumably got to be in the cells. If they do store any, I doubt if they store very much at all, and they certainly wouldn't store it for very long, I don't think.
Next question is, when you say that the bees drive the water off the nectar, do we know how they do this?
Yeah, we do. There's lots of little things they do. They move it from one bee to another. That's one way. It's a little bit like cooling down tea. Just pour it from one cup into another and then back again. They fan their wings to drive it off. So there's several techniques that they use. This is a bit too advanced for what we're talking about today, but if anyone is genuinely interested, then there are books that specialize in those sort of topics.
Super. Next one, do bees store nectar and pollen separately or all together in the comb?
I will be talking about that in the next section.
Super.
I think if I don't, Then please ask the question again.
Yeah, okie dokie. Are the drones that mate with the queen the same ones that are born from that queen? What does this mean for genetics?
We don't know. It's very unlikely. Queens and drones, they've got two ways of mating. There's what one might term the normal way, which is in normal warm weather. They have what are called drone assemblies, drone congregation areas, call them what you like. These are areas out in the open where the drones collect, waiting for the queens to visit them to get mated. Now, I've only ever seen two of these in my life. One was very soon after I started beekeeping, so about 1965, and the other one was in 2012. Now, I lived in the country all my life. I've done an awful lot of working. I've done an awful lot of work in the on the land, and they're the only two that I've ever seen. They are, I'm pretty certain, very much more common than we think they are. Now, they stay in the same place all the time for centuries. We don't know why, although one or two of us have got, I think, a fairly good guess. Anyway, I read recently that in each drone congregation area, there's reckoned to be around about 20,000 drones. Over the years, I've heard lectures from certainly two scientists who've done work on this, and in an area of normal bee density, one said that he felt that there were about 240 colonies represented in each drone congregation area, and another one said over 200. So the chances of mating with a queen from the own a queen mating from a drone from her own hive is pretty remote. On top of that, it's thought that drones and queens actually go to different drone congregation areas. Now, I think probably the jury's out a little bit on this, but this is scientific, I think probably theory at the moment, that for some strange reasons, drones go to drone congregation areas closer to the hive, queens go further away. So if that is correct, in human terms, it doesn't seem right, because you would think that the queen was much more valuable than the drones. Therefore, if she goes to the closer one, she's less likely to be picked off by a bird or get lost or whatever. Now, drones mate with queens mate with several drones. The scientists tell us between 10 to 15. That creates what's called patrilines within the hive. So you end up with different kinds of different groups of workers that are fathered by different fathers. And in fact, this let me just laser pointer. Right, here we are. Take this picture up here at the moment. That bee there is actually quite yellow, but it is different amount of yellow than this one here. That bee there is quite dark. So the chances are that those three bees had different fathers. So inbreeding is, I think, in normal circumstances, likely to be quite unlikely. In any case, it's only probably likely to be 10% of the workers anyway, and then the chances of that are pretty remote. Next one.
Okay. How is wax produced and the cells constructed?
I'm going to talk about that. Yep. I think the next session. Yep.
What percentage of drones and workers are there in a typical hive?
Don't know. It varies quite a bit. I think the bigger the hive, the higher the percentage. You've also got to think about what would happen in a natural state where the bees built their own nest entirely, or a managed nest where the beekeepers decided. My guess is that in a natural nest, it's going to be higher than a managed nest. As far as I've mentioned, I've taken or removed several hundred colonies from wild places. It's observational only because I've never measured it. The total area of drone comb compared to worker comb, in my experience, is usually 10 to 15%. Now, not all of both of those are going to be used, but perhaps we can say perhaps between 10%, 5 and 10% of the bees in a colony during most summers are likely to be drones.
I'm not entirely sure that I understand this one completely. I have a beach house. Can I keep bees in my garden?
Right. I assume sort of it's right on the coast.
Ah, right. I see. Yeah.
BEACH, is it? BEACH?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I would think probably right on the coast. Yes, you can. Absolutely no problems at all. In fact, some shores have some quite good nectar-bearing plants. If you've only got an odd hive or two, it doesn't matter much. But don't forget, you've really only got half a circle of forage for the bees, because the rest is going to be water. But yeah, you should be okay without any problem at all.
Supers.
Where do they come from? Warwickshire?
I'm not sure. It doesn't say. I doubt it. In the UK, can bees thrive in islands such as the Shetlands?
Oh yes, they do. But I haven't been to Shetland, but I've been to Orkney, which is a bit further south. I did quite a bit of work with the Orkney beekeepers there. Now, if you're going to Shetland, I wonder if they're thinking of going, or if they live on Shetland. Right. Okay. Let's assume the worst, and I don't mean this in being disrespectful at all. But I don't believe Shetland have got Varroa. I'm pretty certain they haven't. What you must not do is buy bees from the mainland and take them to Shetland, because if you do, what you'll probably do is wreck beekeeping in Shetland forever. It is very marginal up there. Certainly Orkney, there are very few trees, and I would be surprised if bees would live there naturally. There are, well, certainly in Orkney, when I was involved, there's less than 100 colonies of bees. If there are no trees or few trees, of course, they can't live in the wild apart from in houses. The only bees that I saw there were our native bees. So taking some of the other sort of stuff you could buy on the internet or whatever, that's evolved in Southern Europe, won't last at all. So please, 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 if you're going to Shetland or any of these offshore islands, certainly Isle of Man, well, there's a ban on bees going into the Isle of Man, honeybees going into the Isle of Man anyway. But what you'll do is you'll wreck beekeeping for forever by taking. You've only got to take one Varroa mite, and which you can hardly see, and that will be it. Okay, are we? Oh right, yeah, we haven't got much time left, Richard. Yeah, we haven't got much time left, have we? So do you want to knock the questions out now? Give people time for a break.
Do you want to have a break and then come back, or do you want to do a couple more?
No, Well, come back at 11, really, I think.
Right.
They've only got 20 minutes and no one need a break.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So come back at 11.
Yeah. And if you have a little look through the questions, then you might be able to condense a few. And
yeah, okay. We'll do that. Right, Richard, how do I get rid of this black bar at the top with all the stuff on the Q&A and the participants and that?
if you,
because that's covering up some of my slides.
you should be able to drag it down to the bottom.
That's what I thought I could, but oh yeah, all right. Yep. Okay, that's better then.
So I'm going to stop recording now and then start recording again when we come back.
Are you going to start recording?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, fine. No trouble at all. I'll take dogs for a walk.